let's chat about books, shall we? This is Weekly Reads episode 9. We're going to talk about the 9 books I finished from February 2nd to February 8th. No one should finish that many books in that time period. We're going to talk about it, but grab a snack, grab a drink. I have my coffee and we will get started talking about the books. The first book I finished was an audiobook. It was the AuPair by Tessa. It is the second book in the Big Shot series. The first book was Fangirl Down, which was a hockey romance, and I really enjoyed that book. I had never read a hockey romance. Since I enjoyed that book so much and knowing the second book was about hockey, I was so excited to jump in. This book follows our female main character who is 26, just got back from Antarctica, looking for a place to stay as she's finishing up, I believe, her PhD, and agrees to be a live-in nanny for a hockey player, Burgess, who's definitely older than her. He has a tween daughter. That's how Tallulah gets connected with Burgess, because he needs a live-in nanny. So she agrees to live there, be the live-in nanny as she's going to school. She definitely had a tragic experience that doesn't lend itself very well to dating. And so while it was hockey and I really enjoyed that, I didn't love their dynamic because he is older and she is younger. When he was acting protective, it almost felt fatherly instead of a romantic one. Like, you could definitely see that he was being protective and like, she's mine type of a thing, but it was definitely felt more fatherly. And I don't know if it's because he had a tween daughter that it was very obvious that he was older than her. I don't know. I just didn't love this book as much as I was hoping, especially because I enjoyed that first book. I ended up giving that book 3.5 stars. I did finish 2 books on February 4th. The first book I finished was Dinner for Vampires by Bethany Joy Lenz. This book is a biography about her time before One Tree Hill, but really during One Tree Hill, and as she was a part of a cult during that time, and how a lot of people didn't know, and how this cult is very much different than what we think of as a cult, because she didn't live with them. They weren't controlling. They didn't even really care what she was doing, except they were very controlling with her money, and then tried to use marriage as a means of control as well. I found this book really interesting because I definitely watched One Tree Hill, and her character in the show evolves, and it was interesting to see her outside the show evolving and changing and trying to figure things out. I will say I'm really glad she ended up writing and publishing this, because I think it gives a voice to people that are in cults that don't fit the stereotype cult. And I think that's really important to like bring awareness to, because just because it doesn't fit in this little box doesn't mean that that's not what it is. With that being said, because biographies are someone's own story, I don't tend to rate them very harshly, so I did end up giving this one a 5 stars. The second book I finished on the 4th was Carrie by Stephen King. I picked this because it was on the Roy Gilmore book list. I have read some other Stephen King books, and after reading this one, I think this one is a really great starting point for people. It is about a teenage girl, Carrie, and she becomes a woman. And due to her upbringing, she is very terrified of this. And it ends up becoming a whole ordeal where she wasn't super popular and super liked before this incident, but now she feels even more isolated and even more upset about it. And she does have these like telekinesis powers that have kind of shown up every once in a while. So it talks about Carrie and then her mom and the town and kind of their reactions to all of this. And it all kind of comes to a head on prom night. Working with teenagers, I completely understood this. And I was like, this is 100% how a teenager would act, especially if they had powers, especially if this is what was going on. While I don't feel like it's like a realistic book, I do feel like it is very relatable to many people that have gone through high school, especially women. So I did really enjoy this book, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. The book I finished on the 5th was New Morning Mercies by Paul David Tripp. This is a devotional book that has 365 entries, so has the date, has a little summary, and then the devotional. It's all on one page, so I found it a little bit short for my liking. It was nice on days that I needed something quicker, but there are many days that I wish that it was a little bit longer, and if I needed something quick, then I could have just read part of it. It did have further reading, but I will be honest and say I wasn't great at that. And because it was only a page, if they included scripture in it, the actual devotional part was really short. If they didn't include the scripture, then I wasn't always apt to go and find that scripture. I think the concepts and like the devotional is well written. I just think I need a different type of devotional. So since finishing that, I have been working on some other devotionals that I like a little bit better. Again, I didn't think it was a bad devotional, just definitely wasn't for me. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I ended up finishing 3 books on the 6th. The first one was Listen for the Lie by Lie May Tintera. This is an adult mystery thriller suspense book where Lucy and Savvy are really good friends. They grew up in a small town. Essentially, they end up going to a wedding together when they're out of high school, and Savvy does not make it through the night. Lucy ends up with Savvy's blood all over her. Lucy cannot remember anything, and people think that she is lying. Even her parents question her. However, there wasn't any evidence, and so it just becomes a cold case. And a crime podcaster ends up picking up the story years later and coming to the town and interviewing all these people. Lucy ends up being in town because it's her grandma's birthday. Her grandma encourages her to talk to this crime podcaster, but Lucy is very hesitant to talk to him. But we're getting all of these points of view from all of the people, and you have to figure out who is lying and what they're lying about and why they were lying. And I really enjoyed this book. It was almost like we're getting a behind the scenes of like a crime podcast. I really liked this book. I thought it was really fun, and I don't read a lot of these type of books, so sprinkling them in every once in a while is just a fun treat for me. I don't think I could read like a bunch of them in a row. The second book I finished on the 6th was Holy Hygge, Creating a Place for People to Gather and the Gospel to Grow by Jamie Erickson. Starting off the book, she talks about how she is not from Denmark and is not Danish, but she married a Dane and then is around a lot of Danish people that practice Hygge. And I have read the book of Hygge the beginning of the year, and so this was just kind of taking it one step further. While that book explained what it is, this book, Holy Hygge, takes that concept of Hygge in Christianity and kind of matches it together and talks about why it works so well for the Danish people and how it is incorporated into Christianity and just like living in community. I really enjoyed it. I liked taking that next step because that's definitely something that I struggle with. I am a homebody, but beyond that, I like being by myself, and we're not going to get into all of that right now, but I do not think about inviting people over and extending that hospitality. It's definitely something I'm wanting to grow in. That starts with reading the books and getting the ideas in my head, trying to put it into practice, and just changing my whole thought process on hospitality, which this book really helped me do. So I feel like this was definitely a book made for me. And so with that, I ended up giving it 5 stars. The third book I finished on the 6th was I Got Abducted by Aliens and Now I'm Trapped in a RomCom by Kimberly Lemming. That is a mouthful. It is the first book in her Cosmic Chaos series. I read her Mean Mishaps series, and it's just a really fun series. There's monsters and romance and a loose plot, and I just thought they were really fun books. Definitely not as spicy as the Ice Planet Barbarian. Either way, I was really excited to jump into this book, and I started reading it, and it was just too much. We have Dorothy, who is working on her PhD and gets attacked by a lion, and these aliens grab her and the lion and take them because they're making this planet and they based it off of Earth. They went to like the Natural Museum of History, and so they have all of these random things on this planet, and Dorothy and this lion ends up going there. The lion ends up being her little sidekick, and she's trying to figure out why she's there, what's going on. Like I said, when they went to the World History Museum, they didn't take into account that that dinosaurs and humans didn't exist at the same time. And so there's all kinds of things that just randomly show up. So you're trying to figure out this planet and what's going on, like politically. And then on top of that, it ends up becoming a wide choose. So there is Dorothy, and then there's Locke and Soul, and they have a romance. So there's already a lot going on, and then you're throwing 3 people and a romance there, and Locke and Soul have some history. There was just way too much going on for this book. I will say, because 3 people always intrigues me because I just can't wrap my head around it in real life. And so in books, I'm always so interested in it, but I just feel like there was so many other things going on that was a focus, but was not a focus. It was just like too spicy without like context. With this being a series, I probably will try the second book. I don't know when it's coming out, just to see if it's still as chaotic as this first one. Like I said, our Mean Mishaps were also kind of chaotic, but it all made sense. But I don't know. The world was definitely less chaotic in the Mean Mishaps. And I ended up giving that book 3.25 stars. The last 2 books we're going to talk about, I finished on the 8th. The first one was The Common Rule by Justin Whitmel, Earley. This is a nonfiction book talking about habit and distraction. It reminds me of the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry I read earlier this year. I felt like this one was a little bit more practical. He is a dad with multiple children, and so that makes a difference. He's a dad with multiple kids, and so he does have that perspective. I will say this book and the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry are both written by men, and I just feel like women think differently. So there are parts of it that I wish a woman would have written it. I have read another book of his, and in that book he talks about how his wife is very much involved in the reading and editing of his books. And so I do think there was a little bit more woman's touch in this book versus the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, even though they're both written by men. I think it's a great reminder for the world we live in and how much control we can have over some distractions. And like I said, I read another book, and it's interesting to see the concepts of the common rule in this other book, because it's talking about the household and parenting and marriage and things like that. And that will be in week 14's reading update, because that's how far behind I am. We're working on it. I think this is a good book to like reread and refresh and reevaluate your life and like how much is in it and what's important and things like that. So the last book we're going to talk about is a cowboy romance. It is Smooth Talking Cowboy by Maisey Yates. It is the first book in the Gold Valley series. I've talked about this series before, but they are interconnected standalones. You can read them in any order. This just happens to be the first book. In this book, we meet Luke. Luke has been in Gold Valley for a while. He came when he was 18 and started working on a ranch. You know that there was something with his home life that made him run away. It had to do with his mom, but you don't really flesh it out until further down the book and you see just what was going on and why he ended up in Gold Valley. Once he's there, he realizes he wants to be a rancher himself and own his own land. To do that, he has to buy land, and this land that he wants, Olivia's dad owns. Olivia's our female main character, and she just gave Bennett an ultimatum. Either put a ring on it or we're done. And he did not put a ring on it, so they're done. And so Olivia's having a really hard time with it. Luke proposes that him and Olivia pretend to date to kind of get Bennett jealous and take her back and see what he's missing. And then Olivia will put in a good word with her dad to sell this land because her dad's been very particular. Can we see where this goes? I thought it was really fun cowboy romance. I think watching Olivia find herself was really neat, and then just seeing Luke open up throughout the book I really liked as well. It is a cowboy romance, so just go in expecting that. I ended up giving it 4 stars. So those were the 9 books I finished from March 2nd to March 8th. March was a really, really heavy reading month. Partially we had spring break in there. I don't know what else happened, but there was a lot of reading that happened in March. And so far in April, that's not been the case. We'll see how this goes. Always an interesting time with reading. Anyways, those are the books. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you've read any of them, if you think you know a book that I would enjoy, and I will talk to you all later. Bye!